in their caves. Alcoholics would reproach us and say, what a great thing AA might have been. Every AA member knows that he has to conform to the principles of recovery. His life actually depends upon obedience to spiritual principles. If he deviates too far, the penalty is sure and swift. He sickens and finally dies. At first in AA, he goes along because he must. But later on, he discovers a way of life he really wants to live. Moreover, he finds he cannot keep this priceless gift unless he gives it away. Neither he nor anyone else can survive unless the AA message is carried. The moment the 12-step work forms a group, another discovery is made that most individuals cannot even recover unless there is a group. Realization dawns on the individual that he is but a small part of the great whole, that no personal sacrifice is too great for preservation of this fellowship. He learns that the clamor of desires and ambitions within him must be silenced whenever these could damage the group. It becomes plain that the group must survive or the individual will not. So it has been with AA. By faith and by work, we have been able to build upon the lessons of an incredible experience. These live today in the 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, which, God willing, shall sustain us in unity for so long as he may need it. You see, our original function had to do with people who started groups. Naturally, Dr. Bob became, you might say, the parent of the Akron group. I became the parent of the New York group, and there was Clarence in Cleveland, and there was Earl in Chicago, and Cliff at Los Angeles, and all of these people became founders of AA in their several localities, and very naturally, there being no other way, they got a few people sobered up after a long and strenuous tussle. These first people became a team. In the structural sense, you might almost call this a local pope and a hierarchy. And this was the top of the AA pyramid to come. The top was built first. And as the pyramid grew in its base, and more people came in, the old-timers continued to give spiritual instruction. They either had meetings in their homes or tended to making arrangements. When publicity turned up, they took charge. In other words, they were actually managing the affairs of an infant or adolescent family. And this was just as it should be. But there was a change in this situation. When AA got further spread and rapidly spread, first by the plain dealer articles in Cleveland, and then by Mr. Rockefeller's dinner, and finally the great smash of the Saturday Post piece of 1941, which brought us 6,000 new members within a year's time. Then you had the same phenomena, excepting that local founders, not all of them being models of stability, couldn't last very long. And more and more there was a disposition in these large masses of AAs to ask, well, these old-timers are all well and good, but are they going to run things forever? And this was a very disconcerting pressure to Dr. Bob and me, and particularly to some of these old-timers. Because we were the first two on the scene, it seems that we had a quality of lasting longer than the others. In fact, I only bowed out just in time here a few years ago, and death took Dr. Bob. But at any rate, this was the fundamental of it. So that you began to develop the group which said, in effect, you old-timers ought to get over on the sideline. And those of you that we like and respect, we are going to continue to consult. And those of you who are still, let us say, somewhat undeveloped, we shall label bleeding deep. Well, this injected a new thing. On top of this pyramid of service, now cut off across the top, there appeared something for each group that whizzed round and changed personnel every few months, lest anybody get too much power, and it was called a rotating committee. And at the group level, this was fine, and it was easy for the groups, knowing everybody at hand, to name successful group committees that acted exactly in a town meeting fashion. Well, then some years later, as urban problems got to be tremendous, and there had to be some head or tail way, when they got into that phase, they found immense difficulty for all of these urban people, or even representatives of them, to get together to choose people, a committee, to manage and conduct an intergroup office. This was a very difficult business. In fact, I can think of one town where the confusion was so great that you had 4 or 5 competing old-timers with telephone numbers, each of which announced that this is AA, not the other one, this one is. Now, when they came to put in an office, the schisms in the town were so bad that they actually had to draw lots to get the first office management out. Well, that wasn't such a great success because it stopped a political clamor, but at the same time, it didn't furnish the office with the best possible top management. But little by little, the intergroup management still remained basically democratic in its structure. The group representatives had all the ultimate power, but the committee managing the office could nominate its successors on the theory that they would know the people of the kind of skills required that would be necessary. And that if the meeting of the group representatives, local ones, didn't agree, they could name their own man still. They held the ultimate power. But this began to make room for something that we now call the trusted servant in the AA tradition too. The discovery that you couldn't operate AA in a large urban area on a purely town meeting basis. It was simply too big. Let alone could you operate AA services worldwide. I mean, you couldn't elect a bunch of trustees to serve here in New York by putting out some names and a slate to vote on all over the world.